had a suspicion that Ernest Hemingway had been in the same taxi 40 years ago. But since Papa strode the seafront in Havana, some things have changed. As a journalist, you don't just arrive in Cuba and start working. First, there are some rites of passage, some formalities to attend to. The press center likes to know what you're doing. You have to have a reason to be in Cuba. Mine was music.
Estoy aquí para hacer un documental sobre el tema de la música cubana.
Once your topic is approved, interviews are arranged. Experts to speak about your subject. To discuss the finer points of salsa and Cuban rhythm, I was directed to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I was to meet with Isabel Allende, not the writer, the Foreign Affairs Vice Minister.
Estoy aquí para hacer un documental sobre el tema de la música cubana.
The minister was a nice woman, but someone who perhaps preferred the bump and grind of international politics to the rhythm of Havana nights.
También con su gran inteligencia, hacer que esta batalla no sea una batalla perdida, sino una batalla ganada.
Ms. Allende could speak eloquently on Castro, on Cuban foreign policy, the Helms-Burton blockade. But when it came to music, it seemed I was on my own. A rehearsal in the back streets of Havana. The band is called Sierra Maestra, named after the mountains in Cuba from which the guerrillas led by Castro and Che Guevara launched their revolution 45 years ago. Cuban music is undergoing something of a revolution itself. On the dance floors of New York, Paris and Sydney, Cuban salsa is sweeping the world. Bands like this are now in such demand overseas that locals rarely get to see them. Music has become one of Cuba's only exports. As such, most Cubans simply can't afford it. I had expected to find Cuban music alive and well and living on the streets. But here it seemed music was reserved for foreigners and a middle-class elite with access to dollars. Most Cubans don't have dollars. They're caught in an economic crisis that has been growing since the downfall of the USSR. For years, Moscow looked after this tiny communist enclave. They supplied tractors and fertilizers. They bought Cuban sugar at 5 times the world price. When the support stopped, so did the sugar industry. Now tourism is the largest industry. The revolution itself has become part of the tourist attraction. Right down to Che Guevara, revolutionary hero, martyr, souvenir. For decades before Castro, Havana was a magnet for the famous and the infamous. Landmarks like the Hotel Nacional hover over the seafront, a reminder of Cuba's capitalist and corrupt past. In the 20s, Al Capone had a beach house here. In the 50s, Meyer Lansky and the Mafia treated Havana as their playground. Before the revolution, this was where wealthy foreigners, and especially Americans, could kick up their heels. Castro spoilt their party. But take a look around Havana now, and you find that at least for some, party time is back. More and more tourists are coming here to take a walk on the wild side. Tropicana was the night spot in the 40s and 50s, and so it is again. Now the naughtiness is tinged with a dramatic political history that jaded Western eyes seem to find irresistible. It costs $60 here just to see the show. No meal. That's for a Cuban about 5 months' work. Every Cuban here is working the room, trying to make $1 out of the foreign tourists. Tourists who didn't exist 10 years ago. Every local here has something to sell. This girl is selling the only thing she has, herself. Working girls are known as jinoteras, riders of the horse. But it's not a sexual connotation. Everyone who makes money on the side from foreigners is a jinotera. Like Jose, known as Hochi, a wheeler and dealer. Hochi has found a doctor from Puerto Rico, holidaying here in Havana to indulge his passion for salsa. Hochi is an immediate salsa expert and guide. In return, he'll make a few American dollars. And he needs them. Hochi and his wife live in a typical Havana neighborhood. You don't get tourists here. Here there's a totally different economy working, but one that's increasingly dependent on the US dollar. The people here get a ration book, the Libretto. The state gives products at Cuban peso prices. Every family gets a share.
El nombre de cada persona que vive en la casa, la edad, el año de nacimiento, sexo, masculino, femenino.
But increasingly, the rations are not enough. You need dollars if you want something like meat. And even then, you can't buy beef. That's reserved for the tourists.
Dinero que te pagan cuando tú trabajas aquí es en dinero cubano. Con el dólar puedes ir a la tienda y comprar en dólar lo que te hace falta, que no te, en dinero cubano no puedes comprar.
Hochi's mum, Eva, was a single mother with 7 kids. She worked as a receptionist and a cleaner. Earning about $5 a month, she brought up her children. Hochi's brother, Lazaro, is just visiting. He now lives in Mexico. He hasn't been here for 6 months. Even in that time, he's noticed the economy slide.
Se va a pasar un ciclón por aquí. Todo está peor, ¿no? Más necesidad, más miseria.
Hochi was actually brought up by the people across the road. Eva's house just got too small. Carlos Congoro and his wife Bahilda took in Hochi as a 7-year-old child. Now that he's married, his wife Jacqueline lives here too, in this tiny house. Everything is shared. Carlos saw the old regime as brutal and corrupt, so as a young man he joined the revolution.
Era dictadura, te mataban en la calle. Amanecían las personas muertas en las esquinas de noche. Ahorcanos en los postes, en los cementerios muertos. Y ya hoy eso no existe. Hoy te hacen...
But things are not going that well for Carlos. His wife Bahilda is ill.
Ella quería estar ahí, mira cómo está ahora.
Although he's fearful of the future, he's proud of Cuba's socialist past.
Los hospitales en Cuba, tú ingresas a un hospital, no te cuesta nada el ingreso, no te cuesta nada la cama, no te cuesta nada los medicamentos que te dan allí, no te cuesta nada una transfusión, un suero. No te cuesta
It might be free, but they can't get the right medicine because of the American blockade. And Bahilda is getting worse. There's a music festival at the other end of the island. Cuban taxis may be romantic, but they don't last the 900 kilometers to Santiago de Cuba. So we're traveling in a state-owned vehicle. Our driver Winston earns about $10 a month in pesos. Last night, Castro announced new charges for electricity and phone. Without US dollars, many won't be able to pay. Winston wasn't happy, but he wasn't going to talk about it on camera. Not that he could have that much to say. Winston's been waiting 28 years for a phone. For 6 days and nights, the town of Santiago stops to celebrate Carnival. They've always celebrated the 26th of July, but now it has a double meaning. 45 years ago, during the confusion of these celebrations, Castro's guerrillas came down from the mountains and attacked the government garrison. It was a disaster. Hundreds died. Castro was imprisoned, but it was the birth of the revolution.
Vuelvo y digo, como a las 4:30, 5 de la mañana, entrando yo aquí.
Sebastian Zapata was a young man of 33, but he well remembers the celebrations that year and Castro's doomed guerrilla attack.
Muchos creían que era celebrando el año, cuando había aquí una organización que todos los días 26.
Sebastian's niece has been elected queen of their neighborhood. She'll represent her people in Carnival. For her, it's the biggest day of the year.
Para nosotros es una fiesta muy grande. Es grande porque en primer lugar es una vez al año. Y todo el pueblo siempre esperamos este año y este mes. Julio.
Finally, I have found Cuban music for Cuban people. But even here, foreigners get the best seats. For a week, the party continues. Night after night of music, dancing and drinking. But on the 26th itself, there is no procession. Castro has come to town. Security is high. They might be celebrating it, but no one wants a repeat of what happened 45 years ago. Fidel Castro is 73. Deserted by his old Soviet allies, he now faces his country's economic woes alone.
De las batallas decisivas del triunfo de la revolución.
There have been persistent rumors about Castro's health. As if in defiance, he speaks for almost 5 hours.
El 45 aniversario del...
Determined to outlast lesser mortals.
Un revés.
Not until Fidel goes can the party really begin. The Cold War failed to unseat Castro. But this new threat to Cuban communism is more serious. If it is to fall, it won't be to ideology or to military force, but to tourists, armed only with a fistful of dollars.